Hi, I'm Heidi Christensen from the Genius Paradigm. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about 6 characteristics that you and your student need to develop in order to live your genius. I also have a presentation on helping your child find their genius. I hope you can watch that one as well. Okay, well, I started this journey of looking at genius by researching what those that society already recognized as geniuses say about it. I wanted to find out what characteristics they thought were important. I looked at quotes from Einstein, Edison, Michelangelo, etc., but that wasn't enough. Through my research, I kept thinking back to an original quote that inspired me that's often attributed to Einstein. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. One premise of the genius paradigm is that everyone has genius to share. So I decided that I needed to expand my search and look at people who had shared their genius with the world and what they thought. I looked at a list of the top 100 people who changed the world. I looked up biographical info on them and quotes made by them. There was only one woman on the list, Madame Curie, so I expanded my list to the top 50 women that have changed the world. Some of the people had very little information about them or no appropriate quotes. Others were very well known. All of them had made a difference in the world as we know it today. Through all this, I started compiling a list of attributes that I felt were part of living your genius. One weekend, when my adult kids were home, I printed out and cut apart all the attributes I had put down, and I asked them for help. I figured they had lived this journey with me for pretty much their whole lives, so who better to ask? We spread the words all over the table, and I asked them to sort them, preferably into 4 to 6 piles, but they could go more if they felt they needed it. I didn't have any other parameters for them. The categories were up to them. And then I walked away. When I came back, I was amazed. I knew there were a lot of synonyms there. I thought that they would find one word and put it with others that meant the same. They did that, but they did much more. They helped me see a little bit more about genius. They ended up coming up with 6 characteristics, or 6 categories of characteristics. Characteristics that, 1, impact your ability to learn, 2, move you to action, 3, impact your perspective of the world, 4, impact your ability to use personal resources, 5, impact the way you act, and 6, show how your actions impact others. We discussed the order too. We decided that being able to learn needed to be the first because without it, you weren't able to do anything else. Number 2 and 3 were pretty much tied. If you weren't open to ideas and if you have a negative perception of the world, you can get stuck and it's almost impossible to share your genius. Your personal resources, gifts, experience, knowledge, etc., are likely to remain dormant if you don't have the first 3. The 5th category is all about the characteristics you need to take action. And the 6th is about being willing to take your genius and impact other people's lives. The next day, I asked my oldest to help me try and come up with an acronym for these categories. We looked at driven, but that seemed overused and really didn't fit. Primed was another one that worked, but it seemed more mechanical and made me think of Amazon. Chosen and arisen sounded too religious. Protag, P-R-O. Protag was actually the first one we came up with, short for protagonist. It's an acronym for perspicacious, resolute, optimistic, talented, action-oriented, and generous. I thought it might work, but I was looking for a real word, so we kept trying, but it won out in the end. A protagonist is basically the leading character in a story. Years ago, I read a book by Donald Miller called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. The main message I got out of it was to make your life the story you want to live. It also reminds me of the movie The Holiday that came out in 2006, when Iris, played by Kate Winslet, tells Arthur, played by Eli Wallach, about her problems with her love life. And Arthur, who's a retired screenwriter, tells her, in the movies, we have leading ladies and we have the best friend. You, I can tell, are a leading lady. But for some reason, you're behaving like the best friend. Iris responds, you are so right. You're supposed to be the leading lady of your own life. Anyway, a genius paradigm is about being willing to create the story that you want to live and being the main character in it. The Urban Dictionary is the only place where I found a definition for protag. And they define it as someone who likes anime and dyes their hair unnatural colors such as blue, purple, or any other color, and ends up looking like an anime protagonist. Since I don't have any experience with anime, I asked my kids. They said that when you look at a lineup of characters in anime, all of them are drawn without much color or detail, except for the protagonist, who has more details and very colorful hair. I don't envision everyone that's living their genius having colorful, spiky hair, but I do see them as being willing to be different. So protag works. I have also found that Brandon Sanderson, the author, uses the term protag in his podcast, Writing Excuses. He uses it both as a noun and a verb, and describes characters and people and what they do when they're acting like main characters in a book. And I want you to be, and your kids to be, the main character in the story that you're writing of your life. Be that spiky-haired person that's willing to stand out and share their story. So let's get started learning a little bit more about these characteristics that will help you live your genius. So P in protag stands for perspicacious. I've gone back and forth with this word, but keep coming back to it. Many people can't pronounce it, and very few people know what it means. But I figure that for an acronym about genius, it's appropriate to have a little harder word to start it out on. So, I also haven't found anything I like better. So here's one definition of perspicacious that I found. It's from Merriam-Webster. It implies unusual power to see through and comprehend what is puzzling or hidden. And the Latin root means to look through or to see clearly. I always like to look at the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, and it says perspicacious means to be quick-sighted, sharp of sight, of acute discernment. Being perspicacious is all about being open to learning. Some might say that not everyone is open to learning, so how can everyone be a genius? Well, everyone is open to some kind of learning. It may be a teenager that's open to learning about makeup or the newest celebrity fad. Or it could be a sports fanatic that loves learning about the players and the stats of their favorite team. I'm not talking about just academia. It all boils down to your mindset. You can't be perspicacious unless you have a growth mindset. What does that mean? It means that when you come upon something that challenges you, you must be willing to see that you may not know the answer, but that doesn't mean you never will. As Carol Dweck shares in her TEDx talk, it is the power of yet. She shared how in her research, the people that saw a challenge as something they didn't know yet, but could know with some work, that had the ability to learn. If someone doesn't feel like they can learn, whether they think they are stupid or it just isn't something that they are gifted enough to learn, they can't. They have a fixed mindset and their learning is fixed in place. They can't change unless they become open to growth. In order to grow and learn, you have to be willing to make some mistakes along the way. You won't be perfect or have all the right answers. Our society's focus on not losing is creating a generation of fixed mindset kids who don't know how to come in last place or feel the feeling of making a mistake. Or when they do, they aren't taught what an opportunity it is. When you're given the opportunity to fail, you're given the freedom to take risks and think differently. You don't have to be like everyone else or solve something just like they do. You can be innovative and creative. And if it doesn't work, you do it again. Share with your kids the idea of growth and fixed mindsets. Give them the opportunity to fail and help them learn from failure. Make it a normal part of their education. Teach them that to learn is to make mistakes. And model it for them yourself. Point out when you've made a mistake and talk to them about what you've learned from it. Okay, let's go on to the R in ProTag, which is for Resolute. You need to have a why or purpose that moves you into action. Sharing your genius, having a genius paradigm, means that you have something that is pushing you forward, a resolution to do more. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defined it as marked by firm determination, bold and steady. Dictionary.com adds set in purpose or opinion. Collins' definition puts it a little bit differently, and they put it as determined not to change their mind or change their course of action. The Entomology dictionary shares this about the roots of the word, and it's the notion is of breaking something into parts as a way to arrive at the truth of it and thus make the final determination. All of those have something to do with this idea of being resolute. Many people know of the idea of New Year's resolutions, and the word's probably gotten a really bad rap because of it, as most of these resolutions end up not coming to fruition. But this is more, and it means more. You have in you the grit, the drive, and the willpower to push forward to do what you need to do to share your genius. Angela Duckworth, in her first chapter of her book titled Grit, talks about genius, and she shares how her father would often tell her when she was young that she was no genius, and it's interesting that her life's work showed him to be so wrong. Her research showed the necessary ingredients for genius is persistence and determination to do something. In Daniel Pink's book, Drive, he shares how there are 3 drives, but only 2 of them are really recognized, even though there has been compelling evidence for the 3rd one for decades. The first one is the biological drive. This is the one you need or you die. You have to eat, keep yourself safe, and procreate for the species to endure. The second drive is the one that most people are familiar with, the carrot or the stick. These are the extrinsic motivators like rewards or punishments. Businesses use these all the time, and the current school system is built around it. Problem is, they don't work. More and more jobs of today require the 3rd drive, intrinsic motivation. The 3rd drive was first witnessed in an experiment with monkeys. The researcher wanted to see if monkeys could solve a puzzle. So in order to get them familiar with the puzzle, they put it into their cage for a couple weeks before the experiment. And they were just blown away by the outcome. They solved the puzzles without any rewards. They enjoyed it and liked doing it. And when they did give rewards, it took the monkeys longer and they weren't as focused. This was early in the 20th century, and this was groundbreaking, but very hard for people to swallow. It took a couple of decades for another researcher to continue the research, and this one used the human equivalent of monkeys for test subjects, grad students. They again used puzzles and had 2 different groups. Each test subject came in 3 different days, and they had to play a popular game, putting puzzles into different shapes, and they did the puzzles for a bit, and then the researcher left them alone for 8 minutes. And that's where the real research began. They wanted to see which group continued their focus on the puzzle. The first group wasn't paid and was never told they would be paid. The second group wasn't paid the first day and was told the second day they would be paid and were given money after they were done for the day. But on the third day, they were told they ran out of money, so they weren't able to pay them. What they found was really interesting. The group that was never paid never lost their interest in the puzzle, and during the 8 minutes by themselves, actually increased their playing over time. The test group that was paid on the second day had a short-term increase in motivation, but when the pay was removed, they substantially decreased their engagement. So our current educational system is built on the second drive. Grades are either a carrot or a stick. Helping our students instead develop their third drive by allowing them to play and learn how and what they want, at least to a point. I'm not advocating illiteracy. But if allowing them to do that can help prepare our kids for the future, at least as long as we also help them develop grit. They can't be afraid of failure. So let's go on to O in ProTag for optimistic. So being optimistic is an inclination to put the most favorable construction upon actions and events and to anticipate the best possible outcome. When you think of optimism, what do you think of? A person with their head in the sand or Pollyanna-ish? It is a particular perspective of the world and plays a big part in a person's paradigm. Two books that have taught me about optimism are Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning and Corrie ten Boom's The Hiding Place. Both of these books are autobiographies of the author's time during World War II. Frankl was Jewish and spent time as a prisoner in Auschwitz, while ten Boom helped Jews and was sentenced to a work camp. Both suffered horrific things, but were able to find something to hold on to get them through the experience. Viktor Frankl was only 24 when he went to a concentration camp. He was newly married and had a book he was working on and wanted to get published. He seemed to have his entire life ahead of him, and then everything changed. As a psychologist, he took a little different look at what was going on in the camps. He noticed things that others didn't, and it's what kept him alive. He was behind an electrified fence and was being treated horribly and had no control of his life. But he found that the Nazis couldn't control how he thought. He was the only one that had that control, and he worked hard to keep it. He noticed that when confronted with something, even something he had no control over, he did have control over how he responded. Corrie ten Boom writes in her book about how her sister responded to things. When they were put into a building that was infested with fleas, she chose to respond with gratitude. The guards didn't like to go into their building because of the insects, so they were able to read their smuggled Bible to the other women and give them some hope. Corrie and her sister also could see a brighter future ahead of them. They even planned a way to help those that were mistreating them. Frankl, upon release, learned that his wife and other family members had been murdered, and Corrie also had family members that died in the camps. But both of them continued to find optimism to help them share their genius. Can you imagine being grateful for fleas? It was what enabled Corrie ten Boom to survive the experience she went through, but she also had beneficial effects on her state of mind. Brene Brown shared in one of her TED Talks how gratitude helps her when her thoughts turn to pessimism. She shared how she imagined horrible things happening, like people attacking her and her husband while they were out on a date night, and how their babysitter would have to deal with it with the kids. It was the worst case scenario running rampant in her thoughts. And what helps her get through times like this is listing things she's grateful for, even the most mundane things, so that she could get past her pessimism and get back to the optimistic mindset. Helping your child be optimistic means you need to be optimistic. You need to work at how you respond to the circumstances you are put in and be grateful for whatever you can, even if it is fleas. Model it and then bring your child into it. Write in gratitude journals together. When challenges come up, decide how to deal with them in a positive way. One family I know does this in just an amazing way. When the father was diagnosed with cancer, they went out to celebrate. They chose how they were going to meet the challenge, and they modeled it for their kids. This same man, when he went to his cancer treatments, he wore a top hat filled with little stuffed animals that he shared with the children that were also getting cancer treatments. He chose to take the opportunity to spread love and joy. And I'm grateful to say he is completely free of cancer now. So anyway, I wanted to go on to the T in ProTag at this point, and that is for talented. Now, talented is defined as a natural gift or ability, and sometimes the word genius is even given to people who exhibit talent. One other definition of talent that was used in ancient times is it was a unit of money. The Bible parable about talents is actually about money and investments. I like to think of it as being applicable to the current definition too. So talent is about using your personal resources. These resources could be your interest, your time, knowledge, opportunity, etc. Angela Duckworth's research showed that talent and intelligence don't automatically point to success. In some ways, natural talent can make it harder to succeed. If things have always been easy for someone, when it gets hard, they are more likely to give up. What is more likely to point to success is taking the opportunities, time, interest, and knowledge that is given to you and being persistent. You need that resolution to really make the talent resources work. Tests have often been used to measure talent and intelligence, but they don't measure true potential, according to Duckworth's research. In an effort, it is the effort you add to talent that turns it into skill. It's interesting that's how so many naturally talented people have put in years and years of work to get that way. Daniel Pink shared 3 elements of intrinsic motivation that can help take talents to the next level. Autonomy, which means basically having a choice in the matter. Mastery, which means going deep into something. And purpose, which is a link to something bigger than just where you are and what you're doing. If we can include these in our students' education, we will likely have see a lot of beneficial effects. So let's go on to the A in ProTag. A is for action-oriented, and the Cambridge Dictionary defines it as willing or likely to take practical action to deal with a problem or situation. One of my favorite books is just a short motivational one by Andy Andrews titled Butterfly Effect. In it, he shares the impact of just doing what you're supposed to do, not being afraid to take action, and how it can change the world. These things can be huge, like leading men into battle, or small, like sharing your interest in nature with a child. No matter what, these actions make a difference. They're sharing your genius. How many times have you stayed quiet or stopped yourself from doing something because of fear? Could that have changed someone's world? That fear could have been just of making yourself look foolish or not feeling comfortable. When you push through that fear, you get something so worthwhile. You get to express your true genius. Angela Duckworth felt that action or effort was so important she used it twice in her equations to show what was needed for achievement. She says that talent times effort equals skill, and skill times effort equals achievement. In order to develop your talent, you need to take action by putting in effort, and then you need to put in more effort in order to take the skill you have developed and solve problems. For example, she noted a study of competitive swimmers. Sociologist Dan Chambliss found that it was the effort that was put in daily training that determined success rather than natural abilities or talents. But action needs to be put in the right direction. In his book, The One Thing, Gary Keller suggests asking the focusing question, what's the one thing you can do, such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? This question helps to focus our efforts so that they can really make a difference. It is important to realize that he isn't advocating being totally focused on one thing to the exclusion of all else. By using this question, we can filter out the things that are distractions. Each day, we can begin by asking ourselves, what is the one thing we need to do right now, and then do it. When it's done, we can ask the question again. Gay Hendricks, in his book, The Big Leap, also covers this topic. He talks about focusing on your genius zone. The genius zone is where you get into the flow and can really dive deep. One story he told was about a high-powered executive who took all day to try and install a new printer. After being unsuccessful, he asked a neighbor boy to do it, and he got it done in less than an hour. The executive was very capable in some areas, but was definitely not functioning in his genius zone in this instance. If we can filter out things we don't need to do and allow others to do them for us, we give them a chance to express their genius. Encourage your students to be action-oriented by also helping them focus on what really matters at the time. It can make a difference to so many people. The last characteristic is generous. It's defined as willing to give money, help, kindness, etc., especially more than is usual or expected. I think this characteristic may be the most important one. You can have a genius and live your genius, but if you don't share it, your life will be lesser for it. You need to share it for your life to be more complete. One of the things Viktor Frankl found in his research is that people who had someone to live for were more likely to survive and heal. They felt they had something to give. After reading his book, Man's Search for Meaning, I felt like true meaning in life boiled down to generosity and love. Without it, you have a life that is lacking. Youth today are more aware of the importance of giving back than other generations. There has been a rise in social entrepreneurship whose purpose is not just to make profit, but also to make a difference. Here's an example of someone who's really gone through all of these different characteristics and developed them and used them. His name is Muhammad Yunus. He's a professor of economics who started a microloan company, actually a bank that gives out these microloans to help women start their own companies. These loans are fairly small, sometimes only a couple $100s, but they have a 98% recovery rate. That means 98% of these women are paying it back, and that's just unheard of in the finance industry. His generosity is helping people pull themselves out of poverty. And if he had not been willing to see the bigger picture, perspicacity, been determined to make it work, been resolute, optimistic that he could make a difference, taken the resources, his talent that was available to him, and taken the action necessary to bless these people, our world would be lesser for it. He is truly living and sharing his genius. Think about what our world would be when more people have this paradigm and are living and sharing their genius with the world. You and your kids can be part of it. I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation. And if you have any questions and would like to contact me for any reason, I've put all of my contact info right here, and I would love to hear from you. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.